is Monday, February 10th, 2025. As we are approaching Valentine's Day, a day of expressing love for your mate, thousands of federal employees are wondering if their country loves them. We won't get too deeply into that, but I just will say that it is a time of great concern in our country, and the way things usually go in this great country of ours, things usually work themselves out. Um, it's just great, great time to be alive, and it's a good time that we are in where uh, the I would say our government is like sometimes putting crude metal, in the furnace. We're testing it and strengthening it, and things will get better. Uh, you are viewing Issues and Answers on the WCEG Network, and I am your host, Norman A. Carter Jr. My goal is to enlighten your perspectives about our environment, our socio-political struggles, those banes of classism and racism that make all of our lives more difficult than they should be. In so doing, our hope is to bring us all together in a human tapestry of brotherhood and sisterhood, bound together by threads of understanding, respect, and tolerance of our physical, racial, and religious differences. Hopefully, we can have a discussion of ideas based on facts, not fiction, that will encourage us all to think critically and not emotionally. If you are currently watching, we thank you and inform your neighbors and friends and associates that we can be viewed live via YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and over streaming devices such as Roku. Our podcasts are available on Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, GeoSavan, which is an Indian platforms. All of our programs are archived on YouTube and can be viewed by anyone at any time. Please understand that the topics and opinions on Issues and Answers are those of the host and my guest host, and not the WCEG network. So let's get moving on this installment of Issues and Answers. Today, our esteemed guest is the former judge of the Court of Common Pleas of Philadelphia, the Honorable Mark B. Cohen. In addition to being a former judge, he was formerly an elected member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. Disclaimer: Judge Cohen has been a Facebook friend of mine for at least a couple of years, and I must confess that I never knew he was a sitting judge uh, until the autumn of 2024. Uh, None of his postings ever indicated his occupation, and I certainly had no interest in checking on his background. Um, Most of our conversations, a lot of them, I think, got my first attention. We're talking about Philly sports teams, which I'll mention in a minute, Philly trivia, which I'm sure interests many of you, um, and many posts concerning social issues affecting all Americans. None seem to be political to me. Um, Seemed like there was a general theme in his postings of concerns for the welfare of all humanity in our system of government, which pledges one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. Honorable Judge Cohen, welcome to Issues and Answers on the WCEG Network.
Well, thank you very much. I like your summary of my post. I'm interested in the welfare of humanity. I think that's both flattering and accurate. I am very interested in the welfare of humanity. It's really been my life in the legislature and as a judge. I've paid attention to problems people have, and I've tried to solve them. Sometimes I've had some success in that. I have, I've worked for cleaner air, including reducing smoking in public places. We first began by reducing smoking on the floor of the House of Representatives,
Mm-hmm.
and we eliminated smoking ultimately on the House floor, and people felt better. I used to have a headache after a House
Wow.
session, all the smoke around, as did other people. And suddenly we get rid of the smoke, and no more headaches. And then that ultimately led that success ultimately led to, well, why don't we try that for most workplaces? And so we passed a law doing it. And at the beginning, some people, it was very conspicuous that outside people would go outside to smoke, but people who didn't smoke would feel a lot healthier. And that eventually sent a message to other people who felt they had to smoke and go outside. And, we greatly reduced smoking in Pennsylvania
Hmm.
as a result, and we've got healthier people living longer lives as a result of that. I worked hard to advance the rights of labor unions and labor members in Pennsylvania. I was chair of the labor committee for 7 years. We raised the minimum wage twice. We should have raised it more times after it hit the 725 number.
Hmm.
So business committee said, "All right, we've had enough. We've had enough wage increases around here, just like they did in Washington." They put the kibosh on it, unlike in some other states where the wage is now $15 or more an hour. Pennsylvania is stuck at 725.
Still?
Still,
Ooh,
I don't know.
wow.
Do you know what it is in Georgia? Is Georgia one of the 725 states still?
I think it's a lot higher than that.
That's why well, good for the
Yeah.
people of Georgia.
Yes. Yes.
Good for the people of Georgia.
Yes.
Because it's good when people get more money. I mean, they have it, and some people just get taken advantage of. I've learned. I've told people when I've come into contact with them, and they tell me what their wage is. They tell me, well, I'm earning $7.50 or $7.75 an hour. I say, that's not really very good salary.
No,
You
it's
ought to,
not a living wage.
you ought to try to talk to your employer or seek other jobs. And I've had occasion to do that a lot. I, but it's but really we need a federal increase in the minimum wage, like used to be common. We used to
Right.
use federal minimum wage increases every few years, and that's gone away. And
Should
hopefully,
rise along with the cost of living.
yeah, we need it because the cost of
Yeah.
living keeps going up, and it's certainly going to keep going up in the Trump administration with all its tariffs
Oh,
and its desire to get rid of immigrant workers who generally work at a very low wage. And so, the price is going to go up. Either they're going to be Americans who work at a higher wage, or people won't fill the jobs, and then there'll be a scarcity of food in many cases.
yeah. I know here in Georgia, it would heavily impact it will heavily impact the building construction industry.
Yeah, I
Okay,
mean,
that's another one.
yeah, it doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. I mean, individual Americans will come out better, but on the whole, Americans aren't going to fill these jobs in large numbers, and
Yeah.
that'll just drive up costs of if you have fewer things.
Well, maybe it'll slow down the drive to do those things which are causing that negative impact.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I would hope so. I mean, Trump's policies do not seem to be well thought through, and I I'm surprised at at that.
Mhm.
So, so we're going to. I sure hope that the public policies in the future will be better than they are now.
Well, jumping a little bit ahead because this touches on what you're talking about. I know that since you left the judgeship, that you're now working for in an agency, and one of your goals is to deal with the immigration laws.
Yeah, yeah. I think that immigrants play an important role in American life. I am pleased that the process of reducing the number of immigrants in the country has come at a much slower pace than it had been originally advocated. But if there suddenly are large numbers of people being deported against their will, then I think that they have legal rights,
Right.
and those legal rights should be should be recognized by the courts. That's traditionally been what's happened.
Mhm.
The current administration thinks that, well, we got to make changes. Well, change is good, but not every change is good.
Right. And
And
I,
you know,
I think
nobody's given a blank check to make whatever changes they want. So there's a legislative process to go through. There's a judicial process to go through, and I think that that's the process that ought to be used to make changes.
and I think that what's happening, and I tried to explain this on social media, but I'm going to got it. But these executive orders that everything is being done under, they're not permanent. They're they can be changed at the next president. They're not laws,
Right, that's
uh,
correct.
and a lot of people don't realize that. But I mean, they are basically temporary laws, if you want to put
Well,
it
it's
simply.
not even clear their laws. They have to
Right.
stand. They cannot violate the Constitution. They
Correct.
they cannot violate any federal laws that have been passed by both houses of Congress, signed by one of our presidents. I so it's not clear what authority they actually have, and a bunch of courts have already thrown out some of the executive orders that have been issued, and I suspect many more courts will throw out many more executive orders
Hmm.
as time goes on, and of course that could be appealed, and ultimately it gets to the Supreme Court. But I think there's a limit to how partisan any judge can be. I mean, there's a general duty to follow the law and to
Correct.
follow precedent. And people could avoid that on any given occasion. They could find some reason. One of my former legislative colleagues who became a judge before I did, and who has since passed away, told me, you got to go by precedent in this job, he told me. But the
Hmm.
good thing is there are precedents in all directions. So
Yeah.
you can do whatever you feel like doing. And you find your president.
I was uh, I was reading something earlier, speaking of precedent, and I hope I don't get too far off the beaten track. But since we're talking about Donald Trump, one of his idols was Andrew Jackson, and Andrew Jackson basically, uh, in short, said he had no respect for the Supreme Court or anything, and his attitude was, uh, you know what, I'll do what I'll do, and if you don't like it, try to enforce it. Um,
I think he said. I'm trying to think of the exact quote. At least the
yeah.
exact quote as I remember it. He said, "The Supreme Court made the law. Let them enforce it."
Yes, that's it. That's it. Exactly. That's
Okay.
it. Yeah, that's it.
So that
Uh,
was Andrew Jackson,
right.
and it's not an attitude that ought to be emulated. I mean, Jackson was considered a great Democratic president for his time because he believed the people should have rights and a voice. But many of the things he did were not particularly good by modern standards. He was a strong advocate of slavery for most of his life, and so just because he did something doesn't mean that it's really worth doing. And his vice president, Martin Van Buren,
Mm-hmm.
was a lot better. They had a balanced ticket consisting of a slave owner and an abolitionist.
Mm-hmm.
And Van Buren ultimately ran for president. He was elected once on his own. Then he was defeated for re-election. Then 4 years after he was defeated, he ran on an abolitionist party ticket.
Okay.
And he had a long-term influence on the abolition of slavery, which was a good thing for Van Buren. I'm sure Jackson didn't vote for him for president when he was running on an abolitionist ticket. I know the history of the United States is mixed. And we're certainly a great country, and we've come a long way from where we started. But we have an awfully long way to go in many, many respects. And I think that we have to keep going forward and not trying to just repeal all the many social advances of the last 50 years or so. That's a mistake to try to do that.
I think it's okay to tweak them or try to improve them, but to absolutely just go ahead and banish policies and organizations that have been in existence for decades,
Right.
just at the stroke of a pen, it's not a good management style.
No,
not a good management style.
It's not a good management style, and the policies serve the purpose, like the U.S. aid program, which is now under fire from the right. It's done an awful lot of good things around the world, providing food and providing other necessities of life. And it's just crazy to chop its head off and say we're going to get rid of it. I sure hope it sticks around for many years to come, because many people who have experience in it find it very, very useful for American foreign policy and very strong for humanity. There's a guy, I forget his name, who's from Philadelphia, who was head of the aid department, aid program under President Bush, and he was an assistant head under the senior President Bush, and he was fully head under the last President Bush. And he is full of stories about all the wonderful things the program did, and how it certainly ought to be, if anything, increased. He notes that China's program, which is based on our program, is twice as big as our program. And he thinks we ought to expand our aid program to match China. Not totally eliminate it or come close to totally eliminating it, because it's in our interest to have good relationships with countries all over the world.
I think that the example that I can think of where about the importance of an organization like USAID is, and I'm going back to pre-Cuban Missile Crisis days, when Castro came to the United States asking for aid from the United States and was basically denied any aid. The aid that he was asking for So he went to the next best thing. He went to Russia. Russia began to give him the resources and some of the funding he needed. But the trade off for that is they were bringing missiles,
Yeah,
and so when you leave that vacuum, somebody's going to fill that vacuum,
right.
and it'll work against what your better interests.
That's what that's right on target. We really made a mistake as a country.
Yes,
Yeah, you and I were pretty young if we were then alive
yeah,
when that happened,
yeah.
but it was it was it was a big mistake to write Castro off. He could have just been a minor irritant, or maybe even no irritant at all, and
Sure.
instead he became a major irritant. The U.S.
And,
spent a lot of money and time and aggravation dealing with him for a good number of years.
and a lot of these terrorist organizations that are in the forefront now, they all grew out of poverty, and that's how they recruit their the basic basis of their people. They
Right,
recruit them out of poverty and despair. So when you can fill that gap, it works to everybody's best interest.
right. Uh, there's an awful lot of poverty in the world, and to some degree, it's a solvable problem.
Yes,
And it's gone down over the years, and with more foreign aid and with more philanthropic aid, the amount of poverty can continue to decline. And as people get out of poverty and start working, and they can make a big difference in the lives of themselves and the lives of their fellow countrymen around the world. And the aid program, one of the things the aid program does is it trains leaders. And we have many pro-American leaders scattered around the world who have been trained by the aid program. The U.S. The people have gotten more competent leadership in a variety of different countries, and those leaders are generally much friendlier to the United States than where people haven't benefited from the aid program.
yeah, it's you can be short-sighted and shortchange yourself,
Right,
and just not a good thing. And even from a selfish standpoint, uh, you take diseases like polio, which is close to being completely wiped out,
right,
and some of the other diseases that have been diminished so much. I mean, we're just beginning to hear again about measles. I mean, for years and years and years, nobody talked about measles. Now it's gradually making a comeback,
yeah.
and these are the times when you can stop that from reaching our shores.
I remember as a boy I had measles, and
Same here.
you had
Same
measles.
here.
It was
Yes.
all over
Yes.
my body. It probably took 2 weeks or more
Yep.
to get rid of it. And it was just it was a terrible aggravation. I was missing school, and it wasn't a good thing. And I know then it was even worse if adults got it. And the,
Yes.
the kids grew out of it in 2 or 3 weeks, and then they couldn't get it again. It was acted as a but for adults, some adults died from getting measles,
Yep.
and it was so good. It was a good achievement to get rid of it, and it's just crazy to view that there's anything wrong with vaccines.
Polio was another one.
Yeah, I remember standing in line with my parents. The high school, close to me, girls' high school. You're
Same
probably
here.
with it. You stood in
Same
line
here.
at the same school or a
Well,
different?
not at girls' high school. We stood in line at there was a health center at 20th and Burks in North Philadelphia,
Okay,
and they called us up by I'm pretty sure it was I think it was an alphabetical order or something like that. But
Uh-huh.
it was an orderly process. But when you went there, you stood in a line for a long time.
Well,
But yeah,
people felt it was important, and it wasn't.
yes,
Polio
yes,
is a terrible disease. President Roosevelt famously had polio, and he couldn't walk, and he couldn't, and he died when he was 64. You know,
yes,
it clearly shortened his life, and then it made his life more difficult. And there were plenty of other people who had polio and suffered from it. And the March of Dimes was created
yeah,
to fight polio, and it was a major fear of a lot of people, some of whom or members of their family got it, some of them never got it, but it was a major fear. That
yes,
and it's just good. The less things people have to fear, the better. And I don't understand this crazy, what I consider crazy talk. Well, we don't really need vaccines.
yeah,
Vaccines aren't perfect, and maybe somebody is adversely affected by a vaccine. Well, there are darn few people who are adversely affected by any vaccine, and there are many millions of people around the world, maybe even billions of people around the world, who have benefited from the vaccines
absolutely.
and haven't gotten all these terrible diseases, which and Jimmy Carter was well known for his efforts to find largely obscure diseases that killed millions of people, and people didn't
Absolutely.
pay attention to them, people in authority, because they were poor people scattered around the world, largely but not totally, in African countries. And Carter felt, well, we ought to try to abolish these diseases, and he did with the guinea worm was
Hmm.
a favorite prominent disease that they almost abolished. A big
Yes,
major problem in Africa, and a problem in some other places as well. I think they got it down now. The last I heard was either 6 or 13
hmm,
worldwide cases. I think it was 6 as far as they were counting at the end of 2024. But in 2023, there have been 13. And the Carter Center said, well, maybe there are a few more that we'll find out about later.
sure.
Get it
But
up to.
you're not talking about hundreds or thousands.
Yeah, we're not talking about
Yeah,
hundreds of thousands or millions of people.
yes,
So it's progress, and I think there's so many ways we can continue in progress. Okay, so I'm looking forward to continuing
good.
to find worthwhile things to do.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. Uh, so how has your a new career sort of been going since you,
Well, I'm handling all sorts of individual cases, custody cases, I, I, estate cases,
Mhm.
I, I, consumer protection cases.
Mhm.
So we have all, there are all sorts of people around who try to rip people off, and they shouldn't be doing it. And so I sent first thing I did was send a cease and desist letter, urging people to stop uh, uh, an exercise club
Sure.
was I was ripping a client off. I said, "Stop it!" And so far they seem to have stopped it. Hopefully, they'll
Yeah.
continue to stop it. If they
I
don't,
know
if they don't stop it, we'll sue
I
them.
know it's a great feeling when you can have that type of impact on someone's direct impact on someone's life.
It is a
Uh,
great
yeah.
feeling. There's
And
no substitute for providing direct help to people. It really makes anybody feel pretty good, and that's I'm sure advocates, before the Georgia legislature feel that. I'm sure members of the Georgia legislature feel that, and sure legislators and city councils all over the country feel good. I'm sure you feel good when you help people as a councilman in Snellville.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
there's so many things that you can do, and it's governmental power is helpful, citizen action, by volunteers, that's helpful. You know,
I think that as you and I have one thing we have in common with so many years of public service, it's 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 part of your inner fiber, and it's difficult to give up uh,
yeah,
for that reason.
yeah, I agree. I think it is part of my inner fiber, and I look for ways to help people. Through government positions, through the private sector as a lawyer now.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
it, People certainly have uh, have rights, and certainly people certainly deserve to have advocates who are on their side, whether it's an elected official or a lawyer or a community group. People need help.
Well, one thing I will ask you that's a little bit off the beaten path here, just for a second. Uh, how are things? How's the noise level in Philly? Uh,
How's the noise level?
in Philly, yeah.
It's high. It's pretty high. I live in a senior citizen community, and our community is somewhat restrained. Uh,
Uh,
but I know downtown
yes, yes,
Philadelphia, it's a mob scene, and,
yeah.
some other places, the city came up with a list of various places where they said it's fine to celebrate here.
Hmm.
So one is the closest one to our house is at Frankfurt and Cottman Avenue in Northeast Philadelphia.
Really?
So people yell and scream and climb poles there,
Yeah,
even though there's an effort to try to get people to stop climbing the poles.
yeah. We just had a young kid got killed there was it a couple of weeks ago?
Right.
Fell from a pole.
So it's dangerous.
It is.
People ought
It
not
is.
people ought not to do that. And no, no, there's an old saying that everything everything I like is either illegal, immoral, or dangerous.
Yeah.
I think Oscar Wilde said that, and that's there's some truth to that. I mean, the people.
Moderation in all things.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Moderation in all things. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But and the the social impact on the city. We're celebrating now the Eagles, but it was just was it 2 weeks ago or a week when we had the plane crash on Cottman Avenue.
That was
Uh,
terrible. That was just terrible. I mean, six Mexican nationals, two pilots, a mother, a young child, and two nurses were killed by
it,
when the plane just took off and almost immediately crashed on Cottman Avenue. That was just so disappointing. We never had anything like that for over 50 over 50 years.
well, one thing, and I know you and I have an appreciation of this. Other people don't. That area where that plane crashed, that's a congested area.
Absolutely.
The fact that we had those few deaths in that area is a miracle, an absolute miracle.
I agree with that. Only one person so far from the community has passed away, and he actually didn't even live in Northeast Philadelphia. He was from Northwest Philadelphia, not area
Mm-hmm.
section. He apparently was shopping
Mm-hmm.
in in the Northeast that day. I and then there's a boy who was seriously hurt and was in a
Yeah.
coma for a while, and he came out of the coma. And one of his first question was my sister okay? Because he
Right.
had tried to help his sister. And the second semester is the Super Bowl over?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That-
he got to see the Super Bowl.
Everything in perspective.
He's thrilled that the Eagles won. But it was just a terrible circumstance, and my wife and I drove by we we drove by one of the houses that was destroyed by it.
Hmm.
It was all boarded up, and a lawyer who practiced before me in court, a guy named David Kaplan, who's a very good family law attorney.
Hmm.
His office was destroyed there, and normally he works till 7 o'clock on a Friday night. He uses the last 2 hours of the day to wrap up his records and make
Sure.
sure he's prepared for the next week. And if he was still there, he could have been killed. But this week, he said, let's call it quits around 5:30 today, and
Wow.
go out to dinner. And so he and his wife works for him as his administrative assistant. So they went out to dinner, and their lives were saved. And it's
It's
it's terrible how close people can come to really risking their lives you know over things that are totally beyond their control.
yeah. That's just scary that something like that would happen in a major city. And again, I was just amazed that there weren't hundreds of people killed. Uh,
Yeah.
the,
Well,
the proximity to the Northeast Airport in that area,
yeah.
it's not
Right.
far at all.
We're lucky it was right along Cottman Avenue,
Hmm.
and so there's the shopping center there, and a piece of a plane went to a restaurant that was several blocks away. It's
Wow.
Four Seasons restaurant and Four Seasons Diner.
Okay.
There's a Four Seasons restaurant, which is a big, prestigious thing in Center City, Philadelphia. And this wasn't
Oh,
it. This
that's
wasn't it. This
yeah.
was a community diner, but they've got good food. I've eaten there, and my wife has eaten there, and we like it, and so do a lot of other people. So they're still in business, but they but, but one guy got hit by a projectile of a plane, and he was hurt. I think he's out of the hospital now, but it wasn't good for him.
That's great.
Most of the people who have been hospitalized are out. I think one guy is in a hospital in Philadelphia, and another person's in a hospital in Boston that deals with burn reconstruction. Apparently, he had some roots there. He thought that was a good place to deal with all the burns he suffered from the plane crash.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's terrible.
That's amazing.
I see you're an Eagles fan.
Yes, long time Eagles fan. I've got a video collection of here of games that go back, I guess, maybe as far as um, Ron Jaworski.
Wow.
Yeah, Ron. Of course, my VCR is shot. I don't have a VCR anymore, but I just keep the winning game. Him, lots of Randall Cunningham. My kids awarded me a Randall Cunningham shirt several years ago. So, yeah,
Wonderful.
longtime Eagles fan. Longtime Eagles fan. It's funny because having been a police officer there in Philly, A lot of the games you miss a lot because a lot of Sundays you're working. Um, but on Sundays when I wasn't working, I was right there glued to the TV watching the games.
Yeah. Well, it's great. So in Georgia, who are the teams that are most favored?
Well, we have the Falcons here
Yeah,
in Atlanta. Uh, they're going through a transition full of hope and promise, but we'll see how that goes. And you had the Braves, the Atlanta Braves,
yeah,
and I'm old enough to remember um, seeing the Milwaukee Braves play at Connie Mack Stadium,
me too.
and Warren Spahn was the pitcher. That was my first baseball game I ever went to. So that
Yeah,
was
I
ages.
I saw Warren Spahn pitch at County Max. Oh,
Yeah.
he was a good pitcher. He's a Hall of Famer
Yes.
now, and we got a lot of Hall of Famers.
And of course, all of us, in my neighborhood, all of us wanted to be Robin Roberts. So
Uh-huh. Yeah, he was a great pitcher.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Those were the good, great
yeah. There's
days.
an actress now named Robin Roberts.
Yes.
I keep
Lady
saying
on was it
picture.
ABC? Yeah.
I see picture of her. She's not the real Robin
No,
Roberts.
she isn't exactly.
Real Robin Roberts was the Philly player, and I like
Yeah,
him. I like Kurt Simmons.
yeah. Turk Farrell,
Yeah,
another one of the favorites. Art Mahaffey. Oh, boy, I could go on.
Richie Allen,
Richie
later
Allen.
Dick
Yeah,
Allen, but I still think of him as Richie Allen
yeah.
because
He
that's
used to live in the area where I worked when I worked in the 14th Police District in Germantown.
oh
He used to live right off of Allen's Lane.
yeah. Well,
Wait,
people, there was a time before the the players received the multi-million-dollar salaries each year
yes,
when they were like ordinary people and they lived in ordinary neighborhoods
yeah,
and
absolutely.
maybe a little
Uh,
more upscale than the average, but that time's over now. I doubt there are any Philadelphia players actually living in Philadelphia. There certainly aren't very many of them.
no, too many other options,
Yeah,
expressed in keeping with their income.
right. Yeah.
Unless I heard that um, Jason Jalen Hurts, he lives in right over in Jersey in a $2,000 a month apartment, uh,
Well,
and happy to live there.
well, that
Yeah,
2,000 a
that's
month is
that's that's unusual.
most people,
Unusual.
but it's
My.
certainly many many players of
So
much.
I think we're losing your
Oh,
volume here. I think.
okay,
I don't know
okay.
whether that's a
I have to.
technical problem. I think it is.
Okay.
So,
Well,
Judge, would you like to, as we get ready to close out, do you have any parting words you want to share with our audience?
I think the most important thing for people is not to give up. There are a lot of frustrating things that happen all the time. There are a lot of frustrating things going on now at national and often state and local levels. But I think the important thing is to figure out what you believe and really advocate for and contact your elected officials at all levels, and don't just assume nobody will ever do anything if I ask them to. If
Correct.
you ask them and other people ask them, eventually they say, "Hey, this isn't worth getting into a fight with all these people." So maybe we ought to moderate our position, or maybe we ought to just give up on something. And I, I think the potential for people to have influence has not been changed by election results. People still have the opportunity to have influence. And I think they ought to be willing to exercise that power that they have as American citizens. Uh, an election in which the candidate you like loses does not mean that you're totally shut out in America.
No,
You have
it's true.
rights. You ought to exercise them. So that's my view, and I hope that all the listeners here. I understand there are listeners from all over the country.
Yes, absolutely.
I hope that they follow that advice. This is
And
this is an imperfect country, but it's a great country nevertheless.
I once, this is recently, I heard from a politician here in Georgia. He was talking about a certain issue that came up, and his colleagues were asking. There was a bill that had to be voted on,
Right,
and he voted along with his colleagues. Later on, he found out that a lot of his constituents were not in favor of it, but they never called
right,
him. No one ever spoke up, and so he went with what he considered his best judgment, and I think that's what you're where you're leading to, that if you don't utilize those resources available to you, which is our representative government. We have a democratic republic, and that's what it's set up for. If you don't utilize that, you lose your impact, and each one of us has an impact.
absolutely. We totally agree on that, and we both know as
Absolutely.
elected officials.
Well, Judge, it's been great having you. I personally wish you the best of luck in your endeavors going forward. Uh, this has been a great conversation that we have had, and of course, I know we'll be conversing over Facebook here in, in, in the future. But I think that, uh, and it's come out today that you have a lot of views that you're expressing based on your life experiences,
Absolutely,
uh, which are invaluable to our listeners. And I thank you for being with us and sharing your views.
you're welcome. I've enjoyed it. All the
We
best to
look
you.
forward to talking to you soon. And I would just, for our guest, um, I want to uh, repeat to you something I read to you last week, and I'll read it again because it's relative to uh, the situations that we're facing here today in our country and even in the world. And it's a poem that I treasure. The two poems that I treasure. One of them is a poem called "If" by Rudyard Kipling. That poem has been a guiding factor in my life ever since childhood. And I'm not exaggerating that. And this poem, which I learned later in life, and it's called First They Came. And I read this last week, and I'll read it to you again because I think it's important. It's from a German minister by the name of Martin Niemöller, and it's a they call it a poem, but really an essay called First They Came, and it's brief. It says, "First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me." And I say that because when you see groups of people marginalized or sectored out because of their race, because of their religion, and they are sectored out for the purpose of prosecution or persecution, and you say nothing and do nothing, eventually that monster may come back to bite you. So we all need to be our brother's keeper, look out for each other. And as I said earlier about the Honorable Judge Mark B. Cohen, don't be ashamed to be a humanitarian and look out for each other. And with that, I sign off until our next installment of Issues and Answers. I thank all of you for joining us. We'll be back in 2 weeks with what I hope to be another scintillating program with another scintillating guest. Thank you and have a great day.